Okay, so we're at week 8. Congratulations for coming this far. This week, we're going to do a review on the basics of Python. So everything that we've done the past 7 weeks, we're just going to review them all. We're going to start off with variables.
Okay, so variables are containers for storing data values. A variable is created the moment you first assign a value to, and variables do not need to be declared with a particular type and can be even changed type after they have been set. Syntax. Indentation in Python is very important. Python will give you an error if you skip indentation. At least one space. At least one space. Make sure this space is followed by a respect. Oh gosh, respectively throughout the block of code. Um, Operators. Operators are used to perform operations on variable and values. Python divide the operator in the following groups: arithmetic operators, assignment operators, comparison operators, logical operators, identif identity operators, membership operators, and bitwise operators.
So I'll start on the different loops. So the first thing we learned were while loops, and a while loop just executes code so long as the condition is true. So we enter a loop and we check the test expression, and if it's false, then we exit the loop and we don't execute the code. But if the statement is true, then we execute the statement, and then we test the expression again, and then we keep going until the expression ends up being false. And usually inside the code segment, there'll be something that would eventually make the statement false. Like for example, on the right, we see that number is 0, and the while loop continues so long as number doesn't equal 8. And so inside, we add 1 to number each time. So after a certain amount of times, the statement will be false and will exit. If you don't have this type of statement in your while loop, then your while loop will run forever. The next thing we learned were for loops. A for loop is used for iterating over a sequence, whether that's a list, a tuple, a dictionary, a set, or a string. With the for loop, we can execute a set of statements once for each item in the list, tuple, or set, etc. The loop does not require an indexing variable to be set beforehand. So the indexing variable here would have been like number. Here we don't need that. We just go in the for loop and it just checks the condition, and if it's true, it executes the statement, and then it just keeps going. It keeps iterating through a certain amount, and then it'll stop. So here at the bottom we have fruits, which is a list, and it goes through every single item in fruit. So it goes through apple, and then it prints it, and then it goes through banana, and it prints it, and then it goes through cherry, and then it prints it. And once it goes through all of it, it'll stop. We can also use a range. So if we wanted to run a for loop 10 times, we could just do for I in range 10, and then that basically creates a list from 1 to 10, and then it goes through all of them. We also have if-else statements, and these execute the code only once and only if the Boolean expression in the if statement is true. So an if statement, the else statement afterwards is optional, but it's added as like a catch-all for if all the other Boolean expressions come out to be false and we still need something to happen. So in the code segment below, we have A is 33, B is 200. If B is greater than A, which is 200 is greater than 33, if that's true, then it would print out B is greater than A. That ended up being true, so that's what we print. We print B is greater than A. Then we have another segment. We have C is 8 and D is 9. If C is greater than D, which 8 is greater than D, that comes out to be false. So we're going to skip that. We're not going to execute this print statement. And we're going to go to the else. And the else just says D is greater than D. Well, it should be D is greater than C. And this just catches any other instances. Now we'll talk about casting. Phoebe, take it away.
I forgot I was muted. Um, when casting is when you want to specify a type onto a variable. Examples of ways to cast are int. Hold on. I can see. Int to construct a higher number of integers. Sorry, to construct a number of integer number. What? Construct an integer number from an integer, a float, by rounding down to the previous whole number, a string providing the string represents the whole number. A float constructs a float number from an integer, a float, or a string providing the string represents a float or an integer. And the string constructs a string from a wide variety of data types, including strings, integers, and floats. So like in the example, the first one, the x, is converting s1 into a string. The y is converting 2.8 into a float, and z is converting 3 into an integer, and then print into the console. Importing in Python and in other programming languages, you can import different language libraries and packages to do more things when within your code. Some examples of libraries can be you can import a num and math. So this I don't remember what num does, but like when you import math, you get like math, what do you call those things? I thought, Samira, what do you call those things?
Yeah, like things that you can do with math. So you can find the mean of something, you can find the max of something, just anything you would do in terms of math, like checking for greater than, less than. It just has all these functions that we can utilize without having to write the code ourselves. And NumPy is very similar. NumPy is also math based, but it has more to do with lists and arrays. It's a little bit more complex. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Take over.
All right, so lists are used to store multiple items in a single variable. And they can have items with the same value, or they can have things with many different data types. So you can have a mix of strings, integer, boolean values. So it's a lot easier to just have one variable that stores all of it. For example, down here we have ages. So you might have like a group of participants of something, and you just store all their ages in a certain order, and you could just, maintain that order throughout all your other lists. So ages, it's a lot easier to just have one single thing called ages and just listing all of the different ages rather than having things like age 1 is equal to 25, age 2 is equal to 43. This makes it a lot easier. You can also iterate through these. So this can be used in for loops and while loops. So it gets much, much easier. Here is the collection of data types. So list is not the only way we can store multiple values in a single variable. A list is just a collection which is ordered and changeable, and it allows duplicate members. So here you can have two people who are 25 years old and it wouldn't cause a problem. And each of these are ordered. So 25 is at index 0, 43 is at index 1, 42 is at index 2, and so on. A tuple, on the other hand, is a collection which is also ordered, but it's inchangeable and it allows duplicate members. So it would be permanent. You might want to do something like that if you want to keep certain values secure. A set is a collection which is unordered and unindexed and no duplicate members. So if we think about this, there are no indexes, so there's no index 1, index 0. If you were to print out a set, it would print them out in different orders randomly each time. And the reason why no duplicate members are allowed is because it's unordered. If you were trying to if you had two 25-year-olds in a single set, and if you wanted to reference one of them, you would not know which 25 you're talking about. You wouldn't know. So since it's unordered, you can't have duplicate members. A dictionary is a collection which is unordered and changeable, and it has no duplicate members. And if you remember, the dictionary has keys and all that, and it's very complicated. So next thing we have is functions. A function is a block of code which runs only when it's called. In Python, the function is defined using the def, the def keyword. To call a function, we use the function name followed by parentheses. A function argument is information that can be passed into functions. So rather than writing the same code over and over and over again, we could just have a function for it, and whenever we need to use it, we can just call it with one single line. And sometimes you might have things that you need to pass in. So for example, if you had a function that finds the average of all the numbers, then you might want to pass in a list. You might want to pass in, it might require you to pass in a list because it needs to know the average of which numbers you're trying to find out. The parentheses, so you just call function one, and inside here you see func1 in the parentheses. If this required any arguments, if this had any parameters, you would put in the value. So that is all. We are done. That is all of the basics of Python. We hope you enjoyed this, and we hope that you plan to continue to learn Python. Here we have some extra free resources that you can use to learn Python. There's a lot of good websites. We have W3 Schools, we have Learn Python, Tutorial Point, Codecademy, Programs. There's some YouTube videos. We have some Real Python, Stackify. All these are great to learn Python. Well, thank you, and see ya.